Everybody, welcome back to It's Called Football as we bring you all the highlights after a very eventful weekend in Matchday 12 of the Premier League. Right as this international break gets started now, the last one of the calendar year 2023. There's quite a lot to go over, so let's get right into it. Just a reminder as to how the fixtures kicked off. We started off on Saturday with the early match being between Wolves and Tottenham, and then we saw Arsenal versus Burnley, Crystal Palace against Everton, and Manchester United against Luton Town. Those three fixtures all happening at the same time. And then the late kickoff on Saturday being between Bournemouth and Newcastle United. For any of those of you that watched the Matchday 12 preview, um, or just in general have a good idea of how the league is and how it's been unfolding this season. We were kind of expecting Tottenham, Arsenal, and Manchester United to pick up wins for sure. Newcastle as well were probably expected to pick up a win at Bournemouth, who have not been amazing so far. Um, and Crystal Palace and Everton was more of a finely balanced game, although Palace at home you could argue probably had a little bit of the edge if you were to look at this fixture on paper. But let's see what the results were. There was no shortage of twists and turns in Saturday's matches. Tottenham Hotspur actually fell to a second successive defeat of the season and actually within the same week as Wolves came from behind to win the game against Tottenham. We'll talk about that in more detail just a little later on. Arsenal had a fairly routine 3-1 win against Burnley, although they did have to work for it at times. Burnley did put up a very stiff resistance for a large chunk of the game, but once Arsenal did eventually break them down, they found it easier to find gaps in the Burnley defense. Everton actually, if you remember from our Matchday 12 preview, I had said that Everton were capable of getting a result in this game if they brought their absolute A game. The problem was that Everton haven't been consistent at bringing their A game into match after match after match this season so far, which is why they're still sitting in the bottom half of the table. However, they did bring that A game because Crystal Palace is a very difficult place to pick up a result, and Everton managed to actually pick up all 3 points with a win at Palace. Manchester United had perhaps a less exciting result than they would have hoped for, and less impactful result or performance from what lots of fans are saying about the game. Arguably, you would expect United at home to pick up more than just a goal at Luton against Luton Town, but at the end of the day, a win is still a win. And given how United haven't been able to consistently put together strong performances week in, week out, I guess at this point, the important thing is that they are picking up the win. Luton Town put up a very brave fight, but ultimately they didn't really pose too much attacking threat. There was one good chance for Luton, which United goalkeeper Andre Onana did save quite well. And one of the biggest shocks of the weekend and perhaps the entire season so far is that Newcastle, who have been free flowing, free scoring, and just generally making light work of teams near the bottom of the table, actually fell to a 2-0 defeat at Bournemouth. Now, Bournemouth absolutely earned this win. It was not a smash and grab or a fluke win. Um, they earned this result. Bournemouth were playing the better team. Yes, Newcastle have quite a few injuries, but sympathy isn't necessarily at its highest for Newcastle, given how they lucked their way to a win the previous weekend against Arsenal. And that's not just for me. Newcastle, just in general, have had favorable decisions go their way quite a couple of times this season. And perhaps this is just a little bit of that karmic debt coming back to haunt them a little in the game. Matchday 12's Sunday fixtures saw four matches take place at the exact same time as Aston Villa hosted Fulham. Villa trying to go for 13 home wins in a row. Insane record to try and chase. Brighton then hosted Sheffield in what's expected to be a routine result for Brighton, who've been quite good and consistently near the top of the table. Liverpool then hosted Brentford. Liverpool at home are one of the most formidable forces in all of football, and so you would expect Liverpool to get a win in this game. West Ham and Nottingham Forest then also going head to head at the same time as those three previous matches. And then the big fixture happened a little later than those first four on Sunday as Chelsea hosted Manchester City in the Cashico Derby, the two teams that have only really made their or staked their claim to fame since endless money has been funneled into each club. And again, some results were routine and absolute classic match at the end of the day. But Aston Villa did manage to get that 13th home win in a row as they hosted Fulham 3-1, comfortable enough, and Villa continued to push on. Brighton, on the other hand, stumbled again as Sheffield United managed to steal an important point with a 1-1 draw. Brighton did have a man sent off as well, but ultimately, uh, that 1 point could be absolutely massive for Sheffield United at the end of the season, given that they're kind of in the race with three other teams to not be in those bottom three spots. There's four teams kind of in and around that area right now, and if Sheffield United managed to escape by a single point, this could be the vital result for them. Liverpool, as was pretty much expected, cruised to a 3-0 win against Brentford. Brentford held out decently for a large chunk of the first half, but ultimately Liverpool's quality does always shine through, and it does feel almost like they have a 12th man when they are at home. That crowd just gets behind them and strikes fear into opponents in a way very few other stadia manage. West Ham and Nottingham Forest actually served up a little bit of a classic as well, with a 3-2 win to West Ham in the end. Nottingham Forest did actually go ahead 2-1 at one point in the match, and uh, the way West Ham were playing at the time, it was perhaps thought by a lot of people that this might be it, that Forest might steal the win, which would have been really important for them. But ultimately, West Ham came back from that position to win the game with 2 minutes to go in the match. And then um, you can argue we can all argue all we want about how Chelsea and City have kind of decided to get a seat at the big club table, but there's no doubt that this fixture does provide a lot of opportunity for entertainment. The last four meetings between these two teams actually only had a single goal each time, all of them 1-0 wins for Manchester City. And this time it felt like they almost compensated for that by serving up an 8-goal thriller in a 4-4 draw. We'll talk about that in a lot of detail coming up. Just a quick look at the table and how that's looking at the moment. With Manchester City dropping points by drawing to Chelsea, they now sit just 1 point ahead of both Liverpool and Arsenal. Liverpool are now ahead of Arsenal by a single goal in the goal difference, but other than that, their records are identical. Tottenham Hotspur's defeat has seen them slip further down the table now into fourth, but again, obviously still within catching distance of the top three. Aston Villa quietly going about their business, maintain their fifth place. Um, but it's scary to think that they are basically one win away from just jumping up into second if the teams above them falter, which is it's very interesting. And when we get into Matchday 13's preview, we'll talk a little more about what Aston Villa might be able to do. Manchester United's win, coupled with Brighton dropping points in their draw and Newcastle's surprise defeat, means that United actually come up to sixth now, within touching distance of Aston Villa. Um, Although United's goal difference still leaves something to be desired, their points tally does put them very close to where they would want to be in the table at this point. A little lower, obviously, given some of those defeats they've had. But City's draw also means that Manchester United are now the only side in the English Premier League that has not yet drawn a match. Maybe they just don't believe in it, very Ted Lasso like that a draw is a new concept this season for them. Newcastle and Brighton obviously slipped down the table just a little bit, but they aren't far behind. One week could easily turn things back around. West Ham's win against Nottingham Forest was huge because it pushed them all the way up into ninth place. Remember, they were at the bottom half of the table before this match day had started. And Chelsea picking up a point was enough at the moment to maintain them in 10th place, so they go into the international break in the top half. Um, so plenty of movement in the top half of the table, but nothing really compared to the bottom half. The bottom half of the table saw every single team move in one direction or the other. Brentford were in the top half and have slipped down into 11th place for the time being. They are tied on points with Chelsea, who are in 10th, but behind on goal difference. Then you've got Wolves, who have come up with their win against Tottenham. Crystal Palace's defeat at home to Everton means that Palace have slipped down from 11th to 13th, while Everton have jumped up a couple of places into 14th for now. And then we've got Nottingham Forest, who have dropped down with their defeat against West Ham, and Fulham, who have dropped down as well with their defeat at Aston Villa. And then you've seen kind of a swap of places twice in the bottom four. Bournemouth's win combined with Luton's defeat means that Bournemouth are now sitting outside the relegation places in 17th. Luton have slipped back into them. I did say before this weekend that for Sheffield United, this could be a big, big weekend because all the teams around them were playing some of the top sides in the league. There was a good chance Sheffield United could have made some movement off at that bottom spot if uh, if they managed to get a win. They didn't quite manage to get the win. And of course, Bournemouth's surprise victory over Newcastle was something that most people weren't expecting. But Burnley's defeat at Arsenal means that they have now dropped into 20th place, the first side to get 10 defeats this season. Um, and Sheffield United's all-important point at Brighton has now put them just above Burnley and just a point behind Luton. They are still 4 points behind Bournemouth now, which means that even if Sheffield United were to win their next match, they still wouldn't be able to move any higher than 18th place at the moment. But at least it's a result. At least it's another point on the board for them. There were far too many moments from this match day to cover in just one little visual here, so we're actually going to split it into two so that we can talk about all of it. First of all, the Wolves and Tottenham game, the first fixture of the weekend, actually saw Tottenham take the lead inside the first 3 minutes and then hold on to it all the way until the first minute of second half stoppage time. Um, this match actually set a record. There is no team in the Premier League that has been behind for 87 minutes of the match and then turned it around to win the game. That is until Wolves. Um, After Tottenham took that early lead, you could have probably bet your house on the fact that they would have scored more. They had the chances, Wolves had the chances, neither side took them. And then finally, a bit of quality from Pablo Sarabia, who had just come on as a substitute in the 87th minute, took just a few minutes to get settled into the game, scored a great goal. If you haven't seen it, go online and check out the video highlights of this game. I promise you, you won't be disappointed with that Sarabia goal. Sarabia then actually turned provider a few minutes later, and in the last minute of stoppage time, played an inch-perfect pass right through the Tottenham defense for Lamina to just kind of divert the ball's trajectory just past Tottenham goalkeeper Vicario and into the net to seal an incredible victory. Insane from Wolves and really, really good for them because uh, they've really been almost cheated out of some points from poor officiating decisions in recent weeks, and yet they've also been the one team that managed to beat Manchester City. They managed to draw Newcastle, and now have beaten Tottenham. They're a dangerous side. They are not to be underestimated, and their manager, Gary O'Neill, is doing a sensational job with them. I cannot understand at all why Bournemouth, the club where Gary O'Neill was employed last season, I cannot decide or figure out why they decided to let him go at the end of last season. Um, you could almost argue that if O'Neill had stayed at Bournemouth, I would almost say Wolves and Bournemouth would be in opposite positions in the table right now. Bournemouth would not be in that bottom four if O'Neill was in charge, and Wolves, I'm not sure would have had the quality or the know-how to keep getting these kinds of results that they have been. Leandro Trossard for Arsenal at the start of the season was quite maligned because people felt he wasn't putting in the performances that he should have been, or maybe the quality he showed last season since he joined. But in the last couple of games has really turned it around, and he was instrumental to unlocking Burnley's resistance in their match this weekend. He was incredibly brave for the goal that he scored, which actually opened the scoring in the match just before halftime, when he chased a header that was made by Bukayo Saka, and he managed to get there ahead of the Burnley goalkeeper, James Trafford, and crashed into the post as a result. It was worried that he might have sustained a serious injury, but he managed to shake it off, which was really good news for Arsenal because Burnley, when they leveled the match, needed Trossard. Arsenal needed Trossard again to save them. Really, he had been delivering amazing crosses all match, especially from corner kicks, and that's what ultimately managed to get the other two goals for Arsenal. His corner deliveries are what resulted in William Saliba getting his first goal of the season for Arsenal, and Zinchenko, the left back, also scoring a delightful goal. Again, if you haven't seen it already, feel free to check out the video highlights uh, wherever you can. You won't regret it. They were great quality goals. But Trossard deserves his plaudits because he's been fantastic in the last couple of games. Everton are a side that are looking gradually now like they might be turning it around. The fact that they were able to get such a hard-fought result and they didn't collapse when Crystal Palace kept pegging them back to level terms was promising for Everton fans. And they will really be hoping that this international break doesn't completely kill their momentum because at the moment Everton are sitting in a healthy position in 14th place. They're not in that uh, dog eat dog fight at the bottom of the table completely. Um, they're safe at the moment from it, but obviously there's a long, long way to go in the season, and they need to continue picking up these results. Their fixture in Matchday 13 is not an easy one, but they may continue their form if they continue playing the way they have shown in the last couple of match days. Sheffield United. They may have been a little fortuitous to snatch a draw at Brighton, and obviously it helps that Brighton got a man sent off. But at the end of the day, that point is invaluable for them given the position they've been in for most of the season, and it will be a weight off their shoulders that they can now spend 2 weeks not sitting at the foot of the league table, whereas Burnley now have that extra problem and that extra mental weight that's now resting on all those players and staff. Aston Villa, the other team in claret and blue, should be getting far more credit than I think they are at the moment. Um, 13 home wins in a row in the league is, I don't think there's many clubs that have managed that at the moment. There's very few that have managed that ever. Um, and right now, Villa are playing amazing football and getting the results. A perfect combination, really, for their fans. Um, and they deserve to be where they are on the table. They could easily be higher, and they may well be this time in a couple of weeks. Bournemouth is another team that has started to string together results. That win that they got, the first win of the season against against Burnley. was was great for their confidence, I think, and it was nice to see that they didn't completely get their confidence shattered by the thrashing they received from Manchester City in matchday 11. They, you know, dusted themselves off, came back into this, and thought, you know what, we're not going to get rolled over again, and they deserved it. Dominic Solanke, their striker, number nine there, scored both goals for them against Newcastle. And Bournemouth deserved it, like we said earlier. Well done to them. That was not an easy opponent for them to pick up any result against again, let alone all 3 points. And good for them, really, very good for them. Mohamed Salah looks incredible. I don't really know what to say about this guy. He has been doing it season after season for Liverpool. Um, He just keeps on scoring and assisting. He has now either scored or assisted a goal for 15 consecutive home matches for Liverpool in the league. And this dates back not just this season, but also towards the back end of last season. Uh, Incredible. And he, like most of the Liverpool side, had a little bit of a quieter campaign last year when they needed some more sorting out and they looked a little all over the place at times. He still got a decent goal return last season, and he's showing that despite being in his 30s, he's not going anywhere and he's shown no signs of slowing down. Amazing player to watch, very, very exciting, and hopefully for Liverpool fans, he can continue in this vein for a long time. Another player that sometimes gets the credit that he deserves, but not as much as I think he should, is James Ward-Prowse, West Ham's signing from Southampton over the summer. Um, he's known to be a specialist at set pieces, free kicks, corner kicks, you name it. He just knows how to deliver a ball perfectly and find his teammates. I don't know how he manages to get such pinpoint accuracy, but it's incredible to watch. He picked up two assists for West Ham this past weekend. Both of them came when Nottingham Forest were leading West Ham 2-1. So James Ward-Prowse is the one who basically turned it around for them because he set up both of West Ham's goals to be able to complete that comeback at that point. Um, I think it's shambolic that he's not called up to the England squad, and that he hasn't been regularly called up for the last couple of international breaks, because I think he is definitely one of their best creators, and such a good handy weapon to have from any sort of set piece. So, on to the big fixture. And before this weekend, we said that there was really just one featured match that everyone should tune in. Now, I'll be honest, I didn't expect that it would be quite the result and the end-to-end battle that it ended up being. But just a reminder that, you know what, money does buy entertainment and happiness. Goals can be bought. Um, Chelsea and Man City were nowhere near the level that they showed 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Um, but it did make for a very compelling watch for neutrals. The game started off, in case you missed it or just kind of want a quick reliving of this game. The match started with Erling Haaland scoring a penalty, slightly dubious call, it has to be said. It didn't seem like something that's given all the time. But he opened the scoring for Manchester City. Chelsea was one side that he hadn't yet scored against, and now he has. Um, But normally when City score, that kind of opens the floodgates and they go after more and more. But Chelsea had enough quality and they equalized almost right away. Just a few minutes later, Thiago Silva, 39 years old and still showing he's right up there with the very best defenders, leveled it from a corner for Chelsea. And not long after that, Chelsea actually went ahead. Raheem Sterling, who was a former Manchester City player, now playing for Chelsea, just 8 minutes after leveling the game, he put Chelsea ahead 2 goals to one. And it looked for at least those few minutes that that Chelsea might see it through to halftime ahead. and still in the lead. But Manchester City is Man City, and their own defender, Manuel Akanji, scored his second goal in 2 games to level it for City right before the halftime interval. In the second half, City came flying out of the blocks right away. Within the first 90 seconds of the second half, Erling Haaland scored a second goal for himself, third goal for Manchester City to put them ahead. Again, it looked like this might be a concern that maybe this is where City up the game a little bit and go through the gears to start putting aside another opponent. But Chelsea stood firm. Took them 20 minutes or so to get their response, but they did eventually. Nicholas Jackson, who looked like a more confident player and more confident striker after his hat trick against Tottenham, leveled things up now and made it 3-3. Slightly suspect defending from Ruben Diaz of Man City for the Jackson goal. And maybe you could, if you were being a little harsh, I would say maybe slightly poor goalkeeping from Man City's keeper as well, Ederson, but that's nitpicking, I think, at this point. It was just well done by Chelsea. And then it looked like a sucker punch from Man City as Rodri, their defensive midfielder, who so often somehow comes through with those all-important late winners and equalizers for City, looked to have done so again in the 86th minute. He put them ahead with a deflected strike that went off Thiago Silva and past a wrong-footed Chelsea keeper, Robert Sanchez, and that looked to be done and dusted. But that couldn't be where the story ended because this match also had a little bit of a connection between both sides because Manchester City youth product Cole Palmer made the transfer from Man City to Chelsea this past summer, and it seemed inevitable that in a game that was so unpredictable, he would end up having some say in it, which he did in stoppage time, as Chelsea got a penalty kick for. I don't know why Man City's defenders made the foul they did to give away that penalty. It seemed rash, it seemed reckless, but the penalty was given. Cole Palmer stepped up and leveled it for Chelsea. And the match ended 4-4 at that point. There was nothing else, and everyone was finally able to catch their breath after an insane couple of hours of football. Again, if you weren't able to catch the match or you just want to kind of relive it a little, I would highly recommend watching the highlights. I'm not a fan of either of these two teams, or how their clubs have kind of risen to the top table, but they served up an amazing match, and I've still watched the highlights once or twice. Highly recommend checking it out if you haven't been able to already. So, how did we do with our predictions? Well, a lot of teams kind of didn't follow the script this past weekend. Uh, I thought Spurs would have maybe a little too much for Wolves, and for a long time it did look like it was going to go that way. Um, but you know what? This is one that I'm quite happy to get my prediction wrong about, given that Tottenham are close enough in the table to Arsenal and a little bit of a threat right now. It was good to see that they dropped points. From a neutral perspective, I couldn't believe that Wolves turned that around, but full credit to them. I was quite happy that I got the Arsenal match spot on. Arsenal do tend to concede a goal at home. I know they haven't for the last couple of matches there, but back to usual this time. But I also expected Arsenal to score fairly comfortably and win the game, and in the end, they did manage that. I wasn't expecting Everton to turn up the way they did at Palace, and again, credit to Everton. I kind of expected Palace would score goals at home. They do that, and they generally are enough of a threat at home. But one goal margin just the other way for this match. United, I thought, would be a little more dominant against Luton, and they were dominant at possession. They just didn't make it count for too many clear chances. Ultimately, they still won. They prevented Luton from scoring. Bournemouth and Newcastle, there's no way I would have predicted this result the way it ended up being. I thought Newcastle would wipe the floor with them, given how Bournemouth have mostly been this season, but all credit. Um, Bournemouth deserve it. Villa were, I believe, leading 3-0 against Fulham at one point, and it was just a little bit of a lapse in concentration from them that gave away a goal and cost them their clean sheet, but I didn't quite get that one right. I thought Brighton would dispatch of Sheffield United a little more comfortably than they did. Again, credit to Sheffield United for remaining firm, dogged, refusing to give in when they went behind 1-0, and they managed to level the game. Liverpool have conceded the odd goal now and then due to mix-ups at the back. And I thought Brentford might be a side that could cause that to happen against Liverpool. It didn't, which means perhaps they've sorted out those little bit of defensive lapses. But Liverpool are always free scoring at home, and no difference here. I expected them to score three. Uh, I did think West Ham would beat Forest by a single goal. I just didn't think it would be as high scoring as it ended up being. Um, didn't really think that it would be that kind of game. I thought it would be a little more cagey. And I probably in 100 years wouldn't have predicted the scoreline that Chelsea and Man City served up. City have been so good. Chelsea have been hit and miss over the season. But you know what? Chelsea deserved their draw in this game. Neither side really deserved to win based on the balance of play. And 4-4, yeah, a draw is a fair result. I would never have predicted 4-4. Well, that is where we'll leave you. Sorry we had to go into so much detail, but a lot of action happened this weekend, and we felt it's only fair that we give each team and each story the coverage it deserves. We do have an international break now. We are in the middle of the first of 2 weeks. This break will be over by the end of next Friday. And then by the time we're getting close to the end of next week, we will bring you the Matchday 13 preview. We will try to get a video or two out in the meantime, related to other aspects of what we are going to be covering on the channel. But for now, keep yourselves entertained, take care. Please drop a like if you enjoyed the video and subscribe to the channel and share it around with others that you think may be interested. Um, would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have we done each story justice? Is there any story we kind of missed and should have covered? What was your favorite moment of the weekend? What are you hoping for over the international break? We'd love to hear all of these thoughts in the comments. But for now, take care, stay safe. We'll be back soon with more videos as usual. And remember, it's called football.